let's talk about redlining in Chicago. So I have a map. We'll pull it up on the actual podcast format, the YouTube.
The heat map.
Yes. So it's like super, super clear. So they have done.
And when as of when?
This is from the 2000s. This is the year 2000. So
I'm sure it doesn't look as much different from before.
No, I don't think so. But it's like very clear. There are black neighborhoods, there are Hispanic neighborhoods, and there are white neighborhoods.
Correct, especially in Chicago.
Yeah. So of the 77 neighborhoods, maybe I can expect it from the president of the Chicago Association of Realtors that you know the history of redlining in the city. Do you?
When they started with contract buying.
Wait, so like, can you give whoever's watching a short synopsis on?
So because I'm reading, I'm rereading The Color of Law. Heard of that book? Basically, I don't know the exact year, but contract buying was very popular with African Americans, where you would have owners that would own houses predominantly on the south and west side, and they would sell it to to me, it's an African American on contract, and they would pay their money every month. And if you're late one payment, it all goes to the wayside, and it would. It was. Is
it like a rent to own?
It was rent to own, yes, rent to own. But it was never intended for them to own. So you have the white owner across the street that had a house. Eventually, they sell it for $300,000 to their family. But for us, we'd lose it, and then it was a big thing where
they would hold on to it and do it again.
They would do it again, but they were slumlords. But it was owners that didn't care about the community, not from the community, and they sold it to predominantly African Americans with the hope of dream of home ownership, because it's always been there. And so they'd raise their families, and they were really working 2-3 jobs to pay this note that had exorbitant mortgage rates, and quote unquote mortgage rates. Missed one payment because in the contract, they didn't really read it, didn't understand it. Eventually missed one payment, and they would either have to start all over, they would lose it. So they formed I want to say union or some sort of some coalition where they were going to go against the owners. It worked for some, not for many, but they were scared. And so now we're seeing the effects of the dollar value. So like someone's parents could have owned a house and bought it for $10,000, $15,000, sold it for $300,000. That equity goes to pay for their kids' college, another house,
you can borrow
against it.
Sure.
Where we are so far, we were behind anyway, but it places us so far behind, and it predominantly was on the south and west side, which is why it's kind of not as thriving as some of the other neighborhoods. So that was contract buying. So redlining is you need to leave because a certain ethnic group is coming in here, and I'm only going to show you these have you seen the New Jersey report? That was just recently, the New Jersey Realtors.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Yes, yeah. It's a documentary on how agents, they come in, have a consultation. Some of us ask for a pre-approved.
And it was here.
Or you need to get a pre-approval. Or you need a pre-approval for me to take you out. Another couple in let's go. And this is just like in the last 5 years. This is not like long ago.
But the history of redlining, for what I understand, was
the Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. A municipal standpoint and from like a governmental standpoint, and yes, agents and politics were, certain people belong here,
yes,
and certain people belong here.
Correct.
And the interesting part, I think, is you only need a short period of time. Like if you can relocate people once, it takes a very long time for people to like disperse again. So and I don't understand like the policy. Do you understand like what the policy was? So we both.
Well, the government is the one that wrote the policy. So the funny part is the government who was writing the laws for mortgage companies were actually writing in redlining clauses. So it was a combination of politics, the mortgage companies, and the local government. They would all get together, and they were like, they made the laws for redlining, but then they would say, oh no, we don't need to redline, but they're the ones who put the laws in place.
You almost answered this already. If every realtor was in Chicago was listening to this conversation about particularly redlining and potentially African Americans not being able to get the same types of loans as white Americans, what would you tell them?
So I wouldn't want maybe not tell them anything, but I'm hoping that if there's a part of this conversation that has sparked their curiosity, Google it. Like you have to, Google it, find out more. I mean, this kind of piqued my interest. I may go back and look up a few things to find out the history of something, because sometimes when we know our history, then we can move forward, because I think people can't move forward not knowing the history and only being what they're told. But once you dive deep into the history of something, and you actually learn the origin of it, it's like, oh, that's pretty interesting. It's not what I thought it was, but maybe I can do better. And once someone asks me, or maybe I can tell them, like, actually, this is how it started. So I think I come from a place of education and learning and knowledge. And so that's my takeaway.